out there. You're watching Everything You Need to Know About Mage Knight board game. This is part 11. We're talking about the deed cards right now, and we've already discussed the advanced actions, which are already where they're supposed to be at the start of the game in the advanced actions offer. And now we're going to move on to spells. And some of these spells may be a little bit complex, but we're going to explain them all one at a time. Once again, we're going to go in groups of 4. Red, blue, white, and green. So you kind of get the pattern of this. Now these spells are not played like action cards. These spells are given out as combat rewards and can be found in a mage tower. If you conquer a mage tower, Arithia, you get one for free as a reward for conquering it. Otherwise, if somebody has already conquered a mage tower, Arithia, anybody can go there and spend 7 influence as well as 1 mana of the color of the spell and buy it. And we're going to keep the spells up there, and there'll be a spell offer just like there's an advanced actions offer of 3 spells. Once again, I would recommend not laying out the spell offer in your first game until the mage tower has actually been discovered on the map. Now the first 2 things we're going to notice is there's going to be fire attack and ice attack. And again, there are certain enemies that have resistance to physical attacks. So it's good to have an elemental attack like fire or ice attacks against them, which you'll see in detail when we go into combat. But having a fire attack or an ice attack is better than having a physical attack. And it's better for Arithia to have fire attack because she has the red crystals and she has the energy of fire. It's better for Tovok to have the ice attack because he has blue crystals. So our first spell we're going to look at is Fireball, which requires a red mana to charge. So you play the spell and then pay 1 red mana. Either turn a crystal into mana, or use a red mana token you had this turn, or spend a die from the mana source that's red. This gives you ranged fire attack 5. So you're confronting an enemy that has an armor of 5 and has physical resistance. You can shoot ranged fire attack 5, and you win the combat before you have to block their attack. There's another spell on here, and you can see the darker text. This spell is called Firestorm. This spell requires red mana and black mana. So it's best to play this spell. You have to play a spell at night because that's the only time you can use black mana, but you also have to generate red mana, so it's a little bit trickier. This is the same scenario. We're facing an enemy that has an armor of 8 and has physical resistance. You can take a wound, and then you get 8 points of siege fire attack. I should also mention the difference between range and siege attack is if you're attacking someone within a fortified site, that would be a keep, a mage tower, or a city, and they're behind walls. Okay, they're protected. You can't shoot arrows at them. There are also some enemies that have fortified as a special effect of theirs. There's actually a fortified symbol on their token because they've dug trenches or something. Ranged attack doesn't work against them, but siege attack does. So in that first phase of combat, you would add your ranged and siege attack and attack them with all that before they've had a chance to attack you. However, if they're fortified, you can only use siege attack. Now, if they're fortified and they're in a fortified site, that means that their token has the fortified symbol on it, and they're inside a fortified site. That means they're fortified twice, because of the symbol and because of where they are. So you wouldn't be able to use either ranged or siege attack. We have Snowstorm and Blizzard, which works exactly the same way. You get 5 points of ranged ice attack, or if you take a wound, you get 8 points of siege ice attack. Again, this requires blue mana during the day or the night. Blizzard can only be played at night, and you would need blue and black mana. We have Expose, which says, target enemy loses all fortifications and resistances this combat, ranged attack 2. Well, this is clever. This is something Norowas is probably going to want to do. He doesn't have to worry about physical resistance because if he plays Expose, they lose that resistance. The fire resistance, the ice resistance, the physical resistance, and then you get ranged attack 2 on top of that. Also, if they're inside of a city or a mage tower or keep where you wouldn't be able to usually shoot ranged attack, Well, they lose that. So this encourages range attack, and that's something that white really likes. Charges with white mana, and you can play Expose. Mass Expose doesn't just refer to the target enemy. If you're in a situation like an ancient ruins or a city where you have multiple enemies, this applies to all enemies. They lose all fortifications as combat, or they lose all resistances as combat. So you have to choose if they lose all their resistances or if they lose their fortifications, and then you get 3 points of range attack. That requires both white and black mana to play. You can only play Mass Expose at night. Next we have Tremor. Tremor says target enemy gets armor -3, or all enemies get armor -2. Armor can't be reduced below 0. And then there's Earthquake, which is the stronger spell. Requires green and black mana, and it says target enemy gets armor -3, armor -6 if it's fortified, or all armors get armor -2, all enemies get armor -2, armor -4 if they're fortified, armor can't be reduced below 1. So a little bit of something for everything there. Again, Rithia's going to want the red spells. In fact, she's going to want most of the spells, but she'll want the red spells. Tovok's going to want the blue spells. Norwas is going to want the white spells, and Goldix is going to want the green spells. Remember also that Arithia also likes white, Tovok also likes red, Norwas also likes green, and Goldix also likes blue. By the way, if you can't remember the primary colors and secondary colors, I'll explain what these little dots on the bottom are for, but on the hero card, you can see these 3 dots that have different colors, 2 of one color and 1 of a second color. This is their primary favorite color, and the third one is their second favorite color. So when you have crystals in your inventory, look at this as kind of a schematic. You should have at least this many crystals in your inventory. That's a good goal. Arithia should try to have 2 red crystals and a white crystal, and then maybe 4 red crystals. Well, you can't have more than 3 red crystals, but 3 red crystals and at least 1 white crystal. That's kind of her goal. Forgot to mention that you can have more than 3 crystals of one color in your inventory. You might notice there are a few rules in this game. Okay, the next red spell is Flame Wall, which gives you 5 points of fire attack, which is good against an enemy that has physical resistance, or 7 points of fire block 7. So if your enemy's hitting you with 7 points of attack, you can block it. Fire block 7 means if they're hitting you with 7 points of ice attack, you can block that as well. Flame Wave is the stronger spell. It can be played at night if you have both red and black mana to charge it. It gives you fire attack 5 or fire block 7, just like this does. And it says this attack or block gets increased by 2 for each enemy token you are facing. So the first one counts. The first one's going to increase that by 2. The second one increases it by another 2, and so on. You're going to start with fire attack 7 or fire block 9, and then for each other enemy you add 2 from there. That's really good. Next we have Mana Bolt. It says when you play this, pay a mana. If you paid blue, Ice Attack 8. Ice Attack is good against any enemy that has physical resistance or fire resistance. You can play Ice Attack 8, and they won't be resistant to that. If you paid red, Cold Fire Attack 7. Let me explain what Cold Fire is. Cold Fire is one element, just like ice is an element and fire is an element. But Cold Fire has 2 colors, because it's a combination of ice and fire. So Cold Fire attacks are useful against any enemy unless they have both fire resistance and ice resistance. So you can do Ice Attack against any enemy that has anything except ice resistance, and it will be efficient. You can do Fire Attack against any enemy unless it has ice resistance, or excuse me, unless it has fire resistance. Cold Fire Attack is good against anybody, unless they have both fire resistance and ice resistance. If somebody were to hit you with an ice attack, you'd need a fire block. If somebody hit you with a fire attack, you'd need an ice block. If somebody hit you with a cold fire attack, you'd need to have a cold fire block. You wouldn't be able to do it with some fire block and some ice block. You'd need cold fire block. Cold fire attack, by the way, is the strongest form of attack in this game. So again, if you paid white, you get 8 points of ice attack. If you paid red, you get 7 points of cold fire attack. If you paid white, you get 6 points of ranged ice attack. And if you paid green, you get 5 points of siege ice attack. Mana Thunderbolt is basically the same thing, but a little bit stronger. You pay both blue and black. You can only do it at night. You pay blue, you get 11 points ice attack. You pay red, you get 10 points of cold fire attack. You pay white, you get 9 points of ranged ice attack, and if you pay green, you get 8 points of siege ice attack. It's the exact same thing as Mana Bolt, except you get +3 to any of those attacks. Whirlwind is the white card. Target enemy does not attack this combat. Very simple. If you can't use ranged or siege attack, then you go on to the second phase, which is block. You play Whirlwind, and they don't attack, and you skip that phase, and you skip the dealing damage phase, and you just go to attacking them. Then we have Tornado, which you charge with white or black mana. It says play this only in the attack phase of combat, which means you don't do range and siege attack, you hopefully successfully block it, or else you do damage. Then you play Tornado, charged with white and black mana. It says destroy target enemy. Very simple. Destroys one target enemy. Finally, the green spell is Underground Travel. Charged with green mana, it says move up to 3 revealed spaces on the map. You may not move to or through swamps or lakes this way, and you must end your move on a safe space. A safe space is an area where there's not another player, or it's not a fortified site like a keep or a mage tower or a city, and it's not a rampaging enemy like a orc marauder or a draconum. Okay, we'll get into what rampaging enemies are later, but it can't be on a space with an unconquered enemy. And it says moving this way does not provoke rampaging enemies. This is cool because if you're adjacent to a rampaging enemy, an orc marauder or a draconum, and move to another space adjacent to them, you'll fall into their line of sight and you'll provoke them to attack you. But by this means you can move up to 3 spaces, and if you happen to move adjacent to them, you don't provoke their attacking. And the higher spell is Underground Attack, which is charged with green and black mana, can only be played at night. It's the same as the basic effect, except you have to end your move on a fortified site or on a space occupied by another player. So this is the same, except instead of not ending on a fortified site, you do want to end here because you're going to assault it. It ends your movement and counts as an assault or an attack on that player. Ignore site fortifications, which means you can use ranged attack if you normally couldn't. If withdrawing after the combat, return to your original position. So if you're attacking another player and you were doing player versus player attack, which we're not going to do in this game, by the way, not in this scenario, you would return back to your original position where you started from. So that's the first 2 rounds of these spells. That's 8 spells, and as you can see already, they're very, very powerful, very, very potent, and we still have another 12 spells left to go. So that gives you kind of a primer about spells. Come back next time for more about spells as we learn more about everything you need to know about Mage Knight board game. Until then, GLHF, good luck, have fun.